There is no way that a police department would sell you a full code police car. You can buy anything you would like to on eBay. And for some reason, I went searching for a Crown Victoria. Now, Doug tells stories about Crown Victorias. Arnie seems to love Crown Victorias, and Crown Victorias are usually nothing but trouble. But for some reason, we all love them too. So I went shopping for an Indiana sheriff car. And truckers call them Indiana waffle monsters because they are brown and tan, so they look like waffles and syrup. I minded my own business. Now, circa this is about 14 years ago, and came across a 98 Ford Crown Victoria sheriff car. And it still said sheriff real big on the side of it, brown and tan. It was just an online auction bid, and it's county sheriff car, stars, everything, decals, full code police car. What had happened, it was Miami County, Indiana, northern Indiana, and they were going to run it in the demolition derby because it had a 4.6 in it, and it had a bit of a knock, and they were just going to beat it to death. But for some reason, they did not run it in the county fair, and the officer that still had it put it up for auction on eBay. And you can still, yes, buy everything you would like, find it on eBay. So I bid, and I was the high bidder on a full code Indiana Waffle Monster sheriff car. About 14 years ago, of course, my daughter at that time, 10, 11 years old, and she loved cameras. And her first tattoo was a 35 millimeter on her foot. I was always more of a best friend than a dad, which sometimes is not the best thing to be. But I took her with me everywhere. I said, Kate, I bought this sheriff car up in northern Indiana. We had truck and trailer. Let's go. And of course, she had a digital camera that day, and she went and did her own thing and kind of just took pictures out the window and everything. We get up there to this kind of like an impound lot, like a bullpen, and this gentleman's waving me in, come on in. And I back into this lot, and there it is, brown and tan. Decals are still on it. Still says county sheriff on the back of it. And I'm thinking, man, this cat would have taken the decals off of it before I picked it up. I handed him the loot. Time to go. He drives it right up on top of the trailer. I strap it down. Life is good. And he waves me, see you later, goodbye. I get to US 31. He goes north. I go south. I bought a full code Indiana sheriff car on eBay. So I go home and take it off the trailer, and it's knocking to beat. I mean, it's not good. At that point, I'm thinking, man, let's drop a motor in this thing. I bought it. Let's do it. So I bought another Crown Vic, took a motor out, dropped a motor in it, and I'm driving. I've got a full code Indiana sheriff car, and I am out on the town in this thing. There was a lot of things that I didn't know you can get away with in a sheriff car. I didn't realize you get free McDonald's in a sheriff car. I didn't realize you get free car washes in a sheriff car. There's a lot of cool things you get away with in a sheriff car. I had one of those dare to keep your kids off drugs license plate on the back, and I was so bold where the personalized license plate says donut on it. And so I'm whipping around in an Indiana sheriff car, full code, everything down the side, still says sheriff, tinted windows, and a donut license plate, and other sheriffs are like waving at me like, howdy. And I was a club disc jockey back then. I'd drive it to the club. I'd drive it everywhere. John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard, he needed a trip to Metropolis, Illinois, because he was Jonathan Kent on Smallville, Superman's father, drove the sheriff car. When we unveiled the first General Lee from the Dukes of Hazzard down in Georgia, drove the sheriff car down there. When we did the Blues Brothers trip in 2005, one of my friends drove the sheriff car and directed traffic with it in downtown Chicago. I drove that car so often, and in Indiana, police officers can't have goatees. They can't have facial hair. And I'm just whipping around, standard goatee, waving at officers, this, that, and other. At the time, I had a friend that lived up in Crawfordsville, Indiana, and that's 20 miles or so outside of Indianapolis. And I drove him home, and it was cold, snowing, and a mess out. And after I dropped him off, I got on the highway and heading back home. And right on the exit ramp, the old black ice, the old full code Crown Vic, did a couple donuts down the middle of the highway, went behind a guardrail and then it couldn't get back up on the highway because I was in between Valley and the old Crown Vic sitting there with the headlights pointing out, snow everywhere, buried deep. So Officer Travis here gets out of his car, shuts the door, and I make my way up to kind of the embankment behind the snow, step over the guardrail, and here comes an Indiana state trooper. I'm like, oh man, this couldn't be any worse than it already is. And it's about 2:15 a.m. And he says, "You're a little out of your jurisdiction, aren't you?" And I'm like, buddy, if you only knew I was a little out of my... I was like, yeah, hit a little black ice coming off the exit ramp there, and here's where we're at. And I said, I'm thinking I'm going to go up here to this truck stop, because there's a truck stop at the exit ramp, and see if I can't just get somebody to pull this thing out. Get on in. So Officer Travis gets in with the state trooper. He takes me back to the truck stop, and he says, all right, partner, hey, when you get in there, ask for Tom. He runs the tow truck, and he'll pull you out. Is Tom here? There's Tom. Hey, Crown Vic, the sheriff car. He said, oh, yeah, I heard it come on with the radio. Get on in. Took me back to the Crown Vic. It was a bit of a challenge to get it all the way back up the ravine and out. He got it out, fired up the old Crown Vic, and I said, partner, where were we at? He said, sir, you have a good day. And cut me loose. We got away with everything in the sheriff car. So it kind of sat for a little while, and we had a big time with it. One day I needed to drive it somewhere. We were working on the exhaust for the Cannonball Run ambulance or something. I got in the sheriff car because we had driven it everywhere. And little did I know that I had let the plate go expired. And so I'm whipping down through Johnson County, Indiana to the exhaust shop, minding my own business in my sheriff car, and I got pulled over by a real sheriff. And by the time I was out of it and had my hands on the side of it, I had every officer that was on duty that day in Johnson County, including Whiteland and New Whiteland, Indiana, and half of Greenwood, and had me on the side of the car. And they said, of course, I'm impersonating a police officer. I explained to the arresting officer that I had purchased the vehicle this way. And he said, there is no way that a police department would sell you a full code police car. I had the auction printed off and put it in the glove box. And I said, sir, I bought this car this way. This is my car. Of course, it gets towed in and it's gone because it has expired license plates. They did not take me to jail, but they gave me some time that day to prove that I purchased it that way. So I basically went to the police department with the auction that I took out of the glove box. And lo and behold, the arresting officer is already there, beat me there. I had to wait for someone to pick me up. And I said, here's the auction. I bought it this way. He said, Mr. Bell, I've called Miami County, Indiana, and they did not sell you that car that way. Not only that, we called the Ford dealership that they took it to where the motor was determined to be bad. And the Ford dealership also said there was no decals on that car when it came here. So unless you have something else, you'll be hearing from the prosecutor, and we're filing charges for impersonating a police officer. They swore up and down that I re-decaled the car and put a motor in it, and I was cruising around impersonating a police officer. So I went back to the house, and I was in some crap. But if you remember, I took my daughter with me that day, and she had a digital camera, and she took a picture of the police officer driving it up on my trailer. So I went home, and I printed out all of the photos of the officer that swore up and down he didn't sell it to me that way, and the Ford dealership that swore up and down it had no decals on it, and I was able to prove that I bought it that way. So I went back to New Whiteland, and on the way there, I went ahead and paid for the license plates at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles on the way so I can pick up my car. And I just calmly laid down every photo of this police officer, and it didn't matter what he said. He sold it to me that way. And at that point in time, the officer had nothing he can either A, hold my car on, or B, hold Mr. Bell for. So I got the release, and went and got my car out of the impound. And the guys at the impound were just dumbfounded that they would give me my car back. And at the time, the prosecutor in Johnson County, Indiana, wrote me a letter and said, put this in your glove box because you bought it this way. So if you ever get pulled over in it again, hand them this because I don't want to go through this all over again. So they gave me my car back, proving that the Miami County deputy and officer lied, proving that the Ford dealership up in northern Indiana lied, and I never, ever, ever drove the car again, drove it straight home. Of course, I've talked about Herbie the Love Bug and Cinema Vehicle Services and movie places. The picture car rental people are always looking for police cars. And I had a perfectly good, already decaled up, running and driving Indiana sheriff car. So I called one of my friends that are still in the business, and he purchased the car from me because I had got away with murder. And then there was like a weird Quentin Tarantino movie called Grindhouse, and it had Planet Terror and like Death Proof on it. So if you watch Planet Terror, there is an Indiana sheriff car in Planet Terror that gets blown up. And that was the fate of that police car.
We'd like to thank the Ticket Clinic for sponsoring this month of VinWiki Car Stories. If you get a ticket, no matter where it happens, it can have disastrous effects on your insurance premiums, points on your license, and possible suspension. So it's very important to find a lawyer that's local to wherever you got the ticket. The Ticket Clinic is a national law firm with headquarters in Florida and Texas, but affiliates everywhere, and they can help you fight a ticket and achieve the best possible outcome. They kept me out of jail in Arkansas last year, they've helped tons of my friends, and they can help you too. So visit their link in the description below for a discount.